to the back at the side seams, line them up, make them all beautiful. Take a 1/2 inch seam allowance, make sure you've caught all the stuff on the back, on the front pocket, and it's all serged and beautiful. We're going to do this to both sides. Lining everything up. Yeah, I think yours are much shorter than mine. They are definitely 70 shorts. Calling on the village people. Alright, so we're going to do both sides. And on this side, because you only did the pocket on one side, you're going to find that there's an empty space, right? It's going to look like that. So what you want to do is you want to line it up, top to bottom, as if, like that, as if there was a piece there, even though yours doesn't. And then you just start stitching from there instead, okay? You're going to start stitching from the pocket opening, because yours actually, I did 2 pockets, but you didn't. You only had to do 1. So you're, do not stitch this all the way up to this pocket thing. Make sure that it actually just looks like this. There's this big open space. I'm just going to stick a pin here so that that's what it looks like. Alrighty. We can also, at this point, stitch up our inseams. And you'll notice that we did stitch part of the front together, but we left a fair bit of space right there, so you've got plenty of room to then stitch up your inseams. But do not stitch up your crotch at this point, or the crotch of the pants. Or whatever. It's Wednesday. It is Wednesday. And David has his magic editing tool.
Which I'm not editing now.
Ah, yeah. Okay. So you notice I'm just kind of going from one inseam to the next. You can do that. You just have to make sure when you do it that you actually run off that one before you start the next one, so that you don't join them together. Okay. Which makes sense because you've sewn pants before. Alrighty. So the difference between men's pants and women's pants, one of the main differences is that men's pants, you don't sew up the center back seam immediately. And because you sew up the center back waistband with the center back seam. It makes it really easy to then alter, which really they should do for women's pants too. But they don't because it costs more money. Next step is we're going to sew your belt loops. So you fold it in half and then fold it in half and half again. So it's usually easiest if you press it in half first. Give it a nice clean line. And then you fold it in half and half again, and you stitch along the double folded line, right? So it's folded in like this. You fold it together, and in half. What's that? Yeah, just like bias tape. And then, but you just stitch it together, so you do a nice little edge stitch all the way down, and then when you get to the other end, you can go back up that side. Now, some men's dress pants only have it stitched down one side, and jeans always have it stitched on both sides because denim is quite thick, and so you need to. But I'm going to stitch it on both sides on this one because this fabric's really thick. If you're using a really thin wool, you don't have to stitch it on both sides. You can. It gives it a little teeny bit more of a casual look if it's stitched down both sides. But I'm going to leave that to your discretion. Okay, so you're just stitching right along the edge like that. I'm just going to run off so that you can look at this. And then you stitch the other side as well. Then once you've got that, you're going to fold it in half like this and chop it off, chop it in half, and then fold it in thirds, 1, 2, 3, and cut and cut. And that will give you 6 of all the same length. Now you don't need 6, you only need 5, so it's a little bit wasteful, this pattern, but it's just easier for you guys to cut. Okay. You can use 6 if you want. Then what we're going to do is we're going to place our waistband, our belt loops on first. And so we don't place them close to the center front, we don't place them close to the side. If you were to fold it in half you take that half measurement and you go about an inch or so toward the pocket bag, the pocket opening. It's a little bit closer to the side seam than center front. Okay, so you take this from your side seam to your center front, fold it in half, and then go about an inch or so toward your side seam or toward your pocket. And then you stitch that baby on, and that is your guide. You just stitch it inside the seam allowance. The next one you're going to do, well, we will use all 6 on this one. Yeah, never mind. We're going to put the next one in center back, but not at right there. I think there was a notch. Can't remember this pattern. If there was a notch at a 1 inch, I think there is. Yeah, I think there is a notch at 1 inch. So we're going to go about an inch and a half in. You can actually go a little bit further. It's a little bit nicer if they're not too close together. Go approximately 2.5 inches in from center back, and then stitch that one on. Okay, and then your placement for the other one, a lot of people think it's right here on the side seam, but it's not. We don't put belt loops on the side seam because that's just too bulky, and we want more than one in the back, because that's where your pants tend to ride up and down the most when you're sitting down. So you want to have your belt held in place more there. We don't worry about it too much in the front, right? So then you take those two, you put them together, fold it in half, and you find that. And it almost always, look how exactly that was. I'd say it usually is right above the welt pocket opening. And that was exactly above the welt pocket opening. Yummy. Oh, I toot my own horn there for 1 moment. Okay. So the first one, you fold your front in half, and then you go about an inch or so toward the pocket. Then the next one is center back, and it's about this one's almost 3 inches in. You fold that together. You find the middle, and that is almost always right above the end of the welt pocket. And then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. This time, instead of just kind of doing what I did, you're going to actually take the first side that you did, and you're going to make it exactly the same. So we have some unity. So now we have our belt loops, and they're just hanging out like this. So the next thing we want to do is our waistband. So you have 2 waistbands. You have one that looks just plain. Okay, it's rectangles on each side. And you have another one that is just a nice little square on one side, and on this other side it does this right here. And that corresponds with all of this stuff happening. So we open up our zipper, and this is that front. Remember, I made you to put the fly shield up really high because this now gets tucked up inside. This is what we want it to look like when it's finished. The waistband is finished. We want it to look like this, straight across. So you go like that, and you fold this over, you move this over so that you have a seam allowance on that side, right? Because this is already finished, and that actually just ends up inside of the waistband. So you don't want to line it up exact. You want to slide it over so you have that 1/2 inch seam allowance right there, and then turn it upside down. And this is where it is a little awkward because it's not going to line up with your side seam because you don't have a side seam on this side. So you just have to kind of be a little bit careful. And what we're going to do on this one is we're going to stitch it down. So you're going to start right here. We have it like this. We have it so that it's going right like that. It's coming over, so we have a seam allowance right here. It's lining up like this. And we're going to stitch. And be careful when you go over your zipper. Just watch to make sure you're not going to break your needle, that you're not hitting the metal head. Make sure that your belt loop is tucked up inside. And technically, this goes across and comes all the way across to center back, like that. So if you look at the back, you have your waistband going right up this empty, right up the crotch, right? So it's attached before we sew up the center back seam. I cannot tell you how important that is because people do it wrong every single time. Big star, big star. Waistband before back crotch seam. Then you're going to put the other waistband on, and this one is just normal. You just make sure you have the 1/2 inch seam allowance at this end, right there. Again, be careful that you're not going to hit any metal bits of the zipper, like always. Beautiful. So now we have that. We have our belt loops just hanging down. We have this big, huge waistband happening like that. So the next thing we want to do is we want to, before you start doing any more, I want you to stitch down your belt loops right here because people always forget to do that. So here's a belt loop, and if we were just to go like this and stitch it in, look what happens. It gets all finagly and weird, and you can't just do this either and cut it off because then you don't have enough, you can't get a belt through there, right? So you need to, we always cut them larger than we need, and we want you to line it up like this so that this end is right here, and then figure out how far down, and it's basically a 1/2 inch. Okay, so then you're going to come here and you're just going to stitch, you're going to go across it, forward, backwards, forward, and then bring it over here. And you're going to do the same thing to all of them, making sure the seam allowance is pressed up into the waistband. So you're not stitching through that. You're just stitching the belt loop onto the garment. Okay, so on the other side, your seam allowance is going up into the waistband. And then we're just making sure that the belt loop is nice and straight down, and at a 1/2 inch, we're stitching up and down. And we're going to do that on both sides. Okay, so now our belt loops are nice and out of the way, and they're tucked down. And so when we go like that, then they're attached and all beautiful. Yeah. And in fact, what you want to do right now, just to make life easy for you, is you're going to go like that, and you're going to add a 1/4 inch. You're just going to go all the way across your waistband, and you're going to stitch these in place so that they line right up to the top of the waistband, and then they're in place, and you do not have to worry about it at all. Then your belt loops are taken care of. If you don't do this, inevitably what happens is that you forget, you put your waistband on and your belt loops are still hanging down. So just be kind to yourself and do it now. Doing it at a 1/4 inch so it's inside the seam. Inside the seam allowance. Do those 3. It's really quite easy. It's a few little steps, but it's super easy. Okay, so now we have this, and look what happens here. Look how nice that looks. It's done that. It's all pretty. Life is grand. So now we have this, our cotton, and it's cut on the bias. So you can see it because David cut it out of stripe. The reason we have it on the bias so it gives and takes inside of the waistband. So we're going to do this. We're going to attach this, and we're going to make sure that the top of this fly shield is caught in the seam allowance. And people often say, why do we bother with that? And the reason we bother putting that all the way up is it just gives more stability right there. All right, so I'm now going to stitch right here. Stitching that to my waistband, and I don't have to worry about my belt loops because guess what? They're already done. And match everything up. Oh, I hate this.
Pattern, new pattern.
Oh yeah.
Waistband.
Yeah.
So just
right. I'll just take that off.
They've got both.
This was pattern. From the new pattern. Right. That makes sense. So we'll just.
Theirs will all be correct.
Yeah. Whatever. There we go. Okay. Thank you. And then we'll put this one onto this one. And on this one, you'll notice that because we have folded, it's in the front, and we have folded that up a little bit, the waistband, it kind of got tucked up. When you're going to stitch it on, you can just make sure that's down a little bit so that you can tuck this inside. And again, these are two different patterns, so just make that work. I want to go. You have the same. Yeah.
You've got a waistband from your pattern and a lining from your waistband.
Yeah. And then you're just going to go, you're going to make sure that it's going straight up because that's what we're going to see. And I'll show you after. I didn't do mine quite straight up, so I'll show you what it looks like when you don't. And then how, if that happens to you, how you can fix it. And again, you notice what I did is I trimmed off, right? You do it nice and wide, you trim that off, get rid of that excess. You can even get rid of some of the excess of that. And then you do this. Now, you're like, oh, nobody even noticed when I did this. There's that little notch in that fabric right there. So when you're stitching, you stitch and then you just slide it up. You don't actually have to do a big notch like that, but you can just gradually go up like that to create. What that does, it makes it so that it's a little bit smaller right here. So that, I mean, you can do a big notch thingy, but it often doesn't work out nicely, so I'm not going to make you. A little bit smaller there so that when it's underneath your waistband, it's a little bit smaller. Oh, there we go. This is what I didn't do right. Oh no, it's okay. Okay, so it's a little bit smaller, but then it goes up to the right size after. You also want to check, because this fabric stretches, it kind of does weird stuff. You also want to check to make sure, oh no, that's good. Here's the mistake. You want to make sure that your lines right here, your seams line up. You can see that mine don't exactly? See? So what do you do when that happens? What's that? Be sad and do it again. So you want to unpick it. So because this waistband is kind of smallish, I'm going to unpick this one and I'm going to bring it up and make sure it's exactly the same. Okay. Then you are going to go like this and you're going to push your seam allowance towards your lining, and you're going to, what is this? Understitch. We're going to understitch because we want our lining to stay in place. We don't want it to ride up and be ugly. So we're going to understitch as far as we can go. And because we've sewn it together right here, obviously we can't go right to the corner because that doesn't work. So we're just going to understitch as close. So you want to be about 1/8 of an inch away. Don't do 1/4 of an inch, that's way too far. And as you're stitching, you want to pull, right? You're going to pull your fabric so that seam is totally as flat as you can make it. And you get as far as you can. Back stitch, and get out of there. And then you can do the same thing on this side. Okay, so we did the understitching and we still do not have the back seam sewn up. Okay, so now we get to. So this time, we're going to take this, we're going to make sure all of our seams have been pressed open and flat. We're going to match up right there. So we'll start on the center front where we ended off. We're about 1/2 inch up, somewhere in there. We're matching up our crotch seam like that. Okay. And then you get about right up to that curve. Oh, not quite to the notch. So there's a notch right there. So you're doing 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, and about a couple inches before you get to the notch, you're going to start making a bigger seam allowance. Because when you get up here, it's going to be 1 inch seam allowance. So what you want to do then is you want to push these two together. You want to make sure that this and this are lined up, right? The bottom. So that's all perfect, and you lay that like this. Can you see? Okay. And that, hold it in place and give yourself 1 inch seam allowance. And look how I'm stitching this together. I am stitching the pants together, and then on the same step as I'm going, then I'm going to stitch the waistband together, and then I'm stitching the lining together. So when I get to here, I want to make sure that this is lined up as well. And I just go straight up like that. Oh, well, there we go. Let me get myself another bobbin. Ooh, hot pink. Nice. We don't use hot pink enough in our world. Although in the 80s, yeah, they used it plenty. All right, just finish that seam. And then you want to make sure when you open this up, it looks like this. You want to make sure that this and this are lined up equally. So everything is perfect. So this seam goes across just pretty perfectly, and that one does too. Because then you're going to press this whole seam flat like this. So you have this big wide seam like that, and then that comes down, and then I'll show you how to attach it on the inside. And this is why men's pants are so easy to alter, is because all you have to do is unpick a little bit here and unpick that and take it in or take it out. So then to finish it off, we're going to fold it down a little bit so the seam is not right at the top. And then all this has been pressed up. And for this sample, I always like it hand stitched. Sorry. You only have to do half. Okay? Just really don't like these full machine stitched. No. So you're going to hand stitch it. So, but you fold it down like this. If you didn't fold it down like that, look what happens. You have the seam right at the top, and you're going to see this lining sometimes. It's going to fold over. And also, the lining's not big enough. Right? It barely covers it. So you have to pull it down about 1/2 inch so that you can then press this seam up and press this under 1/2 inch, and then just do a quick whip stitch. Okay. Attaching that all in. All right? There you go. You only have to do 1/2 of that. Leave the other half open. And I would recommend you leave it open to about right here so that you can see your center back, so you can remember this, because people always forget this. All right?